Hi, and welcome back to a rather late installment of our protracted Bible read-through program here at Woodruff Road Presbyterian Church. This is a better late than never look into the book of Ruth. And here's what's great about the book of Ruth. Even if it is late, even if it's 11:30 p.m. on August 31st, it is still not too late to read this book in its entirety and to watch this video. So you're going to be okay. As long as you get in by, say, 11:30, you should be very good. Okay, when I look at the book of Ruth, there are four key elements that come to mind for me and that I think are worth drawing your attention to. The first is the context. The second is the prevalence of blessing throughout this book. The third is the kinsman redeemer, an idea you probably know about. And the fourth is the epilogue, this element of the story that tells you why this is part of the big story of the Bible. So let me try and explain those. First, let me start with the context. As far as the context, the book of Ruth opens telling us it's during the days of the judges. And the judges are that somewhere between 200 and 400 year period, depending on how you date it, that follows the conquest of the land of Canaan as the Israelites go into the land of the promise, and before they have a king. And you know that story very well, especially if you've read it recently. It's a period of chaos, of rebellion, of leaderlessness of the people that shows how they continue to fall into sin. And so that sets up what is going to be a contrast in this book. Now the book of Ruth itself starts out with its own kind of chaos. There's a man named Elimelech. Elimelech is kind of an ironic figure because he's got this great name, my God is king, or God is my king. And he doesn't act that way. There are hard times in which he's living. In Israel, there's a famine. And he lives in Bethlehem, which also ironically is Hebrew for the house of bread. And Elimelech is going to take his wife and he's going to leave the land of Israel and he's going to go into the land of the Moabites. He's going to leave the place that should be a blessing and go seek blessings among God's enemies and the enemies of God's people. And so when he goes there, there's a sense in which he comes under the wrath of God. It doesn't say so exactly in the story, but you can tell by the fact that when he goes there, he spends some time there and then he dies, and then within a period of 10 years, he has two sons, and both of those sons are going to die as well. Well, in the meantime, those sons had themselves taken Moabite wives. And so at the death of each of the three of these, they've left three widows in the land of Moab. Naomi, the wife of Elimelech, and then Orpah and Ruth are both left without husbands. Well, at some point, Naomi hears that there's prosperity in the land from which she came. She hears that the house of bread, Bethlehem, is once again truly the house of bread. There's prosperity there. And so she rightly thinks to go back to her own people. In going, she dismisses her daughters-in-law and says, I love you, Lord's blessing be with you, but you stay here. But of course, we know that one of them is going to stay with her, Ruth. And that's where the blessings begin to reveal themselves in the story. Naomi, again, as we saw in verse 6, is that she recognized that the Lord had visited his people, is what the text tells us, by giving them bread. And that's the beginning of good things. And Naomi herself is a giver of good things. As I mentioned before, Naomi says to her daughters-in-law, go each return to your mother's house, and the Lord deal kindly with you. And the word there, deal kindly, is the word chesed, if you're going to say it the right way. And it means kindliness or steadfast love is frequently a better translation, or even some people will render it as covenant faithfulness. The Lord give his covenant faithfulness to you, and may the Lord grant you rest in the house of her husband. She's hoping that her daughters will find new husbands and they will move on and be content and be blessed of the Lord in Moab. But of course, Ruth won't be parted from Naomi. She wants to stay with her because she loves her, and so she displays her own kind of hesed, her own kind of covenant faithfulness to stand by Naomi when she returns. Well, that brings us to chapter 2. Chapter 2 has more blessings. In verses 1 and 2, we're introduced to Boaz, who has clearly been blessed of God. And then in verse 4 in chapter 2, the first words that we hear from Boaz's mouth is a blessing to his workers. And they bless him in return. And then there's an interaction with Ruth, and he is blessing her not only by words as he does his workers, but he blesses her with deeds because he sacrificially loves her and provides an abundance for her to take home. He says in verse 12, he says, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done." So again, he's asking for blessings, and because he recognizes that Ruth herself has been a blessing to Naomi and to her family. So that encounter results in more blessings, and Ruth goes home. Naomi celebrates, "Blessed be the man who took notice of you. Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness, chesed, to the living and the dead." And so these blessings are being poured out all around among the various parties in the book, asking for the blessings of the Lord and celebrating God's blessing on his people. We get to chapter 3, there's more of the same. Of course, chapter 3 is that tense moment where Naomi encourages Ruth to go see Boaz at night. It's a moment where it's full of tension. And in that moment, Ruth is called on to put all her cards on the table before Boaz. And she does, and she goes to him and she invites Boaz to redeem her. We'll get to that in just a few moments. When she does that, Boaz is absolutely overwhelmed, and he recognizes that the way that she has come to him, its origin is of God. He says in Ruth 3:10, concerning Ruth, he says, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich." And so Boaz doesn't spurn her invitation to redeem her, but he welcomes her and he blesses her still more. And then finally we get to the 4th chapter when all of this comes to this glorious resolution. And blessings are going to be poured out in every direction now. And so first Boaz plays the man. He does the work. He secures the redemption of Ruth as his wife. And Naomi's family lands are protected. And as this all happens together, as he's going to take Ruth as his wife, the people bless both Ruth and Boaz. We read this in verses 11 and 12. "All the people who were at the gate and the elders said, 'We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. And may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this woman.'" They want every blessing. They want famous blessings to fall on the house of Boaz and Ruth. And immediately the Lord honors their blessing. Verse 13, conception is given to Boaz and Ruth, and a child is born. And then in verse 14, after all the blessings are bestowed from one to another among the people, and all these blessings are being experienced from the Lord, the people finally turn their gaze toward heaven for the gift that Naomi herself has received in this new family and this new grandchild Obed. And we read these words, and I want you not to miss this, because now they've turned heavenward. In verse 14 of chapter 4, it says, "Then the women said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel. May he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him.'" At last the Lord himself, the one who has been blessing all the people throughout this book, is himself blessed by the people. Well, there's final 2 parts worth mentioning, and I'll be brief here. One is the kinsman redeemer. It's a word that comes up throughout the book, and the Hebrew word there is goel. It's kinsman redeemer, and it's a person who is a close relative who is to deliver his kin, his family, from difficult circumstances. And of course, when he does so, it's at a cost to himself. This is what Boaz does. And of course, this is a picture of the Lord Jesus Christ. He is the one who was one from among his brothers, who goes to his people, even though they don't receive him. And he goes to rescue them from a problem they have. And the problem they have is their sin. And how does he rescue them? He rescues them at the cost of his own life. You know that. You've heard that before, but don't miss that when you read it again. And finally, there's the last word, the epilogue in verses 18 to 22. where we read, "Now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. And now you know the rest of the story."